All right, class, please pay attention as we begin our lesson. Today we'll be looking at section 2.3 and 2.4, simplifying fractions and comparing and ordering fractions, and they can be found on the following pages. First, we need to take a look at this term right here, equivalent fractions. Okay, equivalent fractions. Equivalent fractions are fractions that are equal to each other. So, for instance, if you have 1/2, 1/2 could also be written as 2/4 or 10/20. They're equal to each other. It's basically saying the same thing, but you just make the fraction look a little different. Other equivalent fractions could be, for instance, 50/200. You could reduce that down and get 5/20 or 1/4. So, whether you're reducing them or increasing them, you can create equivalent fractions. To equate an equivalent fraction by increasing, simply multiply the top and bottom number by the same number. For instance, you could multiply it by 2, both top and bottom, to get what we have right here, or multiply the top and bottom by 10 to get what we have over here. So, example 1. List 3 equivalent fractions for each. Now, you could list a multitude of different fractions, but honestly, what I prefer to do is just multiply it by 2 and 10, if I'm able to. So over here, I could multiply it by 2 and get 2 and 6. That's equal to it, because I multiplied both the top and bottom by 2. I could multiply it by 10, which would get me 10 and 30. I picked 10 because it's real easy. All you have to do is add a 0 to the end of the numbers, so it works out well. You could also choose other numbers, like you could choose 100, multiply by 100, then just add 2 zeros. And all of that is equal to 1/3. It's all still 1/3. Next, we have 4 and 12. You could reduce this fraction by saying, well, 2 goes into both of those, so I could have 2/6, because 2 goes into that 2 times, 2 goes into that 6 times, 2 goes into that again, and I could get 1/3. So both of these are actually equal to 1/3, all right? Using this same idea right here, where we reduce a fraction down to this point, it's known as simplifying, right? Let's take a look at example 2. You're told to simplify a fraction. That means get it to its smallest term. Now you can do this a few ways. One way is example A, is where you reduce it by saying, hey, 2 can go into both of them. 2 is a factor of both of them. This is kind of where we use the whole factors thing. And you could divide both the top and bottom by 2 to get 6 and to get 18. Then you could divide again by 2 to get 3 and 9. And then you'll notice that 3 goes into both of those numbers. 3 goes into this one time. 3 goes into this one 3 times. So you have 1/3. Another way you could have done it was just to find the GCF, the greatest common factor, between the top number, which is called the numerator, and the bottom number, which is called the denominator. So the GCF of 12 and 36. So what is the GCF of 12 and 36? What's the biggest number that can go into both of them? 12. Well, if I divide this by 12 and this by 12, it equals 1/3. So this, if you find the GCF first, it allows you to do it in one step. You can get to the simplified number in one step, as opposed to doing multiple steps, okay? But if you can't find the GCF easily, I recommend you just find a factor and divide by it and work your way down that way. Either way, you get the same answer. Some ways are just easier than others. So, with these examples, let's try them. I have 60 and 140. I noticed that they both end in zeros, so 10 can go into both of them. So I could reduce this by 10. How many times does 10 go into 60? 6 times. How many times does it go into 14? I noticed that this number has an even number and an even number, meaning that 2 can go into both of these numbers. So that would equal 3 and 7. Okay, so this number up here reduces down to 3 and 7. Up here, what can go into both of these numbers? 24 and 27. I noticed that 3 can go into both of them. 3 goes into 24 8 times, and it goes into 27 9 times. It can't reduce anymore. Here, this one's a little tricky. Might take you a while. Is there anything that can go into both? Well, you find out that, turns out that 7 and 3 can go into both of these numbers. But also, it turns out if you really think about it, 21 goes into 21, and 21 goes into 105. You might not know that right away, but like I said, you could reduce it by 3 or by 7 first, however you want to do it. It would take a little while just to figure it out. You could just do it by thinking of what are the factors of 21 and then seeing if those factors can go into this evenly just by testing it out. So if we do that, we would say 21 goes into 21 one time, and it goes into 105 5 times. All right, let's look at comparing and ordering fractions. Comparing fractions. When comparing fractions, we use the greater than, less than, or we use the equal to symbols, okay? So here we have 1/2 and 5/8. So which one is greater? Well, something to do to help us find that out, because sometimes we know right away, but sometimes we don't. What we can do is we can get this, if we can get the same denominator, then we can tell right away. My denominator over here is 2. My denominator over here is 8. So now the question is, when simplifying, we use GCF. But now we want to use LCM. So we're going to use LCM to say, is there an LCM for 2 and 8? Well, yeah. They can both be multiplied to 8. 1 times 8 is 8, and 4 times 2 is 8. So if I multiply this, if I multiply both top and bottom of this by 4, I would get 4 over 8. And 4 over 8 is the same as 1/2. And then I have 5 over 8, because I didn't change this one because it already had the 8. So which fraction is bigger? Well, obviously 5 over 8 is bigger. Now we can tell easily. Next, we have, over here, we have 5 over 10 and 2 over 3. What's the common multiple of 10 and 3? That would be 30. What do I have to multiply 10 by to get 30? 3. If I multiply the bottom by 3 to change that to a 30, I need to multiply the top by 3, which would get me 15. Over here, I'd multiply the 3 by 10 to get 30. Since I multiplied the bottom by 10, I multiply the top by 10 to get 20. So which one is bigger? Obviously, 20 over 30 is more than 15 over 30. Okay? We'll go over more examples of this in class. If you don't understand this, please write it down. If you need to, pause the video and just rewind it a bit and watch it a few times and see if it helps you understanding it better. Last part, ordering fractions. Order the fractions from least to greatest. So smallest fraction to the biggest fraction. Once again, kind of difficult to do when you don't know, when they're all different like this. So one thing to do is to think, Okay, is there a common multiple for 8, 4, and 2? Well, yes. They can all be multiplied to 8. 1 times 8 is 8. 2 times 4 is 8. 4 times 2 is 8. So if I do this, I have 5 over 8 for this one because it doesn't need to change. This one, if I multiply it by 2, I get 8 on the bottom. Whenever I do the bottom, I do the top. Multiply it by 2, I get 6. This next one, I multiply it by 4 to get 8. I multiply the top by 4, I get 4. So put them in order from least to greatest. I would have my 1/2 is my smallest because it is only 4 over 8. And then I have my 5 over 8, which is only 5 over 8. And this 3 over 4 is actually 6 over 8. So we're going to put 3 over 4 last. It's the biggest. So this is from smallest to biggest. Okay? Once again, sometimes difficult to tell because some people would think 5/8 is bigger than 3/4, but it's not really. It's not. Trust me. So next, we have 5, 4, and 6. What's a common factor for all of them? Okay? After playing around a little bit, doing a little checking back and forth, you would find that 60 is the first number that they have in common, okay? So 60 is the first number multiple they have in common. I can multiply 4 to get 60. I can multiply 6 to get 60, and I can multiply 5 to get 60. Okay. So here we have these numbers, and we're going to say, well, what do I multiply this by to get 60? Multiply 5 by 12, I get 60. Multiply the top by 12, I get 24. Multiply the bottom by what to get 60? Well, 4 times what gets 60? 15. So multiply that, you get 30 over 60. So over here, we end up with what times that? You multiply that by 10 to get 60. Multiply the top, you get 20. So which one's bigger? Well, that one is. So obviously this one needs to be moved over here. So we say we have 2 6 is the smallest, then 2 5ths, then 2 4ths. See, some people don't think about that. They think 6 is bigger, but it's a fraction. So the denominator, the bigger this is, a lot of times the smaller the number is actually. But of course that also does depend on what's in the numerator. It helps once you've turned all the denominators to the same number, because then you can easily see that 20 is smaller than 24 than 30, and you can put them in the proper order. Okay? Hope that helps. Remember, don't understand something, write a question down, and I'll explain in class more.